All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, November 10th. So, what did we do for the indices today? Well, I think it's pretty clear. Once again, Nasdaq, the Qs, they're just not where it's at right this second, right? Super short term, and the small caps are picking up the slack, right? That's where that's where funds are kind of looking to shift into, to buy, to kind of diversify out their portfolio. The small caps finished up 1.8%, almost the exact opposite of what the Qs did today. 1.8%. SPY kind of caught in the middle of that. Essentially flat for the day, down just 10 basis points. The diamonds, if you look at Dow stocks, which are kind of interesting right now, they also kind of caught in the middle of that, but up 1%. Kind of the tiebreaker, I think, goes to the Dow. Gold, silver, not much of moves there. Bonds had a little bit of continuation to the downside. Maybe we can put them in this light red. The VIX was down a little bit today. Tried to rally a couple times today. A little bit after the open around 10:30, then around like 1:30, but not much oomph out of the VIX today. Let's go through sectors really quick. The home builders had some nice momentum to them. What is it? DRI. Reported earnings today, and the symbol is DHI. I always get that name confused. But really strong, really nice numbers out of there. Carried the group. Lennar followed there a little bit. Saw some call activity. You had aerospace and defense. Boeing is a decent portion of that ETF. Did decently today. You also had things like consumer staples, energy, industrials, transports. Those all seem to do pretty well. Biotech kind of slipped in there too. Remember, there's a lot of small cap healthcare and biotech in that IWM ETF in there too, besides the financials. Financials did fine today too. The banks were up about 1.3, 1.4% for the day. They just didn't really move today. So of course, like I'm sorting this by intraday move, but really what you should be looking at too is the overall move. Just because they didn't move intraday, it doesn't mean they didn't have a good overall day. So let's talk a little bit about these themes, and then I'll go over the technicals and the indices as I always do. I would say the second theme that I have written down here is let the rotations and adjustments play out. If you've been really conditioned and you've got a lot of muscle memory, what I refer to as muscle memory, in all these tech and growth names, right? And it seems like there are so many people who are infatuated with these names. They're very overcrowded, right? It is what it is. I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but you have to realize, and a couple of people told me on Twitter, and I see this on Twitter too, just reading, not tweets, from me, but just people in general. Oh, well, e-commerce isn't going away and digitalization isn't going away. But I go back to what Stan Druckenmiller said yesterday. They're over, everybody's been in these stocks. So again, overcrowded. Again, so you just have to, you want to get these names kind of forgotten about a little bit. Once they're forgotten and off the top of people's pages, then they will come back a little bit. But for now, I mean, it's again kind of just echo some of the things that we talked about yesterday. The vaccine is a good thing, and funds are going to rotate into some of those things that are really beaten up. And that was a continuation, again for today. So let that play. Like if you don't want to buy value or some things in value, which, by the way, you have the flexibility to do that. No one says that you have to stay pigeonholed into these growth names. You can rotate around and do your own thing. That's the advantage of not having like a fund dedicated to this or that. If you're a retail trader, you could trade whatever you want to. You just have to get over being stubborn and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to look at this. I'm not going to look at this group." So. And again, you could be a little bit quicker. That's how I am. You can kind of rent names rather than, buy names. Of course, you do have to buy them, but I'm just trying to play out an analogy here. You can day trade some of these names. I day traded Boeing today. Do I really want to be in Boeing for the long term? No, I think that it's too complicated. For me, Boeing, right? But I could trade them for a short-term trade and get in and out. And of course, I was in this, and we started to see negative headlines about, the regulators might be after them again for something. So you kind of have to be careful with Boeing, even though it got above the 200-day moving average. Here was my little scalp trade. It was the first thing that I jumped into today. I was actually looking for bank. For another day of bank strength. And, I was watching JP Morgan and Goldman, not so much the smaller bank names, but they just weren't doing anything in the first few hours of the day. A lot of stocks didn't do a ton of things today. But that's what I was kind of focused on, was for continuation in the financials. I didn't really pull the trigger on anything there. But Boeing, and Boeing and some of the industrial names I was also looking for. So, this gave a little bit of a trade for me today. It kind of stalled out. Like I said, this was the red bar when there was an announcement that the regulators are going to go after them again on something. But so that's the story there. And you got to be quick. So yeah, that's a renter. Right, I'm in and out of that one pretty quickly. I did do some other trades. I'm looking for value. Like I said, I was looking for some things that I think could run a little bit. I think this Goldman is interesting. Right, Goldman Sachs is, just coming out of value. Again, it really didn't do anything until the afternoon. And if it wants to run, it's got a little bit of open field in front of it. Right, it burned off those overbought levels, and I think if it gets above, you could see this R1, so resistance 1, Venom, and you really don't have much in front of it until you get to this, 232 VPOC. That's a nice little trade, or even 227, right? So just to put something on your radar for tomorrow, because bonds move down again. Right. Oh, I forgot to go over the indices. Let me go over those, and then we'll start to we'll talk about a few other movers and some of my trades as usual. But bonds are moving down again, so again, that should be good for the banks, right? They didn't really get much of a bounce. Actually, ZB was up, which is the longer, plus, 30-year futures. If you look at TLT. TLT was actually down 60 basis points, but again, different duration there. TLT is plus 20-year, so it's got multiple maturities in its basket of the ETF. All right, so S&P, like I said, I skipped this. This is not a bad thing. Remember too, I think that what I'm seeing is traders with not a lot of patience right now, including myself. Right? We want to have fun days to trade and so forth, where we're hitting 3 or 4 trades or something like that, which is really nice. But you just have to realize last week was a huge week, right? So be patient. Let this market digest. One of the things that I noticed too, even before we got the vaccine news on Monday, when I was going through, my scans, because, I put together the TTG weekend watch list every weekend, of course, and I was going through a lot of scans, and I'm like, I'm not finding a ton of new setups. So when that happens, then of course we got the vaccine news, and we had this major gap up yesterday. But going back to what I was doing in terms of research this weekend, I was not finding a bunch of names that were jumping off the page to me, and that's normal after you have 5 green candles in a row. So just let this play out a little bit. It's normal to have chop after a big move, right? There's not a lot of, people are jumping to conclusions, right? We see all this data like, oh, well, the last time that this index, outperformed this one by over 1%, that meant, danger. Of course, right? How many times do you hear these things, right? These comparisons, or the last time that this happened was 2008, right? And it happened 3 times. I mean, guys, you have to realize we've had a very unusual year. I'm not going to make comparisons to the last time that this data point where value outperformed growth by 1%, then this happens. Guys, we've had an amazing year in terms of events and outside forces. As far as I can tell, unless you're comparing the last time that we had an epidemic like what we had with the flu back at the turn of the century, that's what you should be comparing things to. Find some data points that happened the last time that there was a major epidemic. So try to weed through the noise of everybody comparing, when value outperforms growth, or when the equally weighted S&P outperforms the regular S&P. Come on, this is really like crackerjack type analysis, in my opinion. So I think as long as we hold 34.96, I think that the uptrend is intact, and we're still breaking out. We just might do it on a slower basis for a little bit. So that's level to watch. Also, if you want a nearer term level, or a closer level, I should say, watch 35.21. Right, we kind of held that all day today, which is pretty good. Not to say that we can't take that level out, but maybe get a little bit more conservative if we start to retrace a little bit more. Let's go over to for the Qs, and then we'll end with small caps. The Qs are obviously a different picture, right? We know that we've seen this rotation that started, yesterday pre-market. So the Qs, are still above most of the short-term moving averages. They're above the 50-day moving average, but if this thing chops around for a couple days to a week, so be it. You just have to have a little bit more vision than outside of the super near term, in my opinion, and structure your trading for that too. Well, I'll give you a couple examples too. While I think this Qs group may need maybe even just another day to kind of get things sorted out if you really like the Qs. But 275, notice that we're holding this 200 period moving average, which I think is important on this 1 hour chart for short-term trading. Notice that we've been above this, right? I go to this reference point a lot in these videos from a few weeks back when we broke it, right? So we did this big move up, right? We did take out this last VPOC, by the way, and we're sitting back at this kind of trend line. Right, this 200 period moving average. So let this be your guide. If we lose this, we're going to see some more pain, obviously probably down to this 275 or 276 region. And then who knows what happens, right? So, I think, again, be patient with this. Small caps are doing, let's look at the small caps, right? Again, crazy looking candle. At one point, they were up like 7% yesterday, which is like a ridiculous move. So they're holding the breakout too. I think you just kind of have to get past that big candle and realize we're above all the short-term moving averages in IWM. That's a good thing, right? And also, if you look at the 1 hour, this is trending right now. So nothing really bad, going on. I can't really come up with anything negative or a sell signal here. It looks good. All right, so a couple other things, right? If you look at some of these stocks for the day, right? I'm on the 1 hour chart, not on a 5-minute, but if you look at like Amazon, for example, or Microsoft, right? What do you notice about these stocks at the end of the day? There's no balance in these names. So, trading is about kind of, again, I'm using the patience word, but waiting for a little bit of a signal, not just going out there and buying. Now, if you want to scale into something, you could do that. I mean, I scale into some things too where they haven't given me any confirmation that they've bottomed either. But I'm just using this as kind of a little bit of representation that you don't have any confirmation that these are done going down yet, right? And the fact that, a Microsoft is down 3.4% for the day, and there's no buyers that are coming in. Amazon down about the same, close to 3.5%, and nobody seems to care, right? In terms of, again, the institutions control this market, not what you think, not what I think, right? It's the institutions. They need to start buying this again. So if you're the first person in buying, obviously, that may not end up working. So, by the way, you have a level to watch, right? 3,055. If price gets back into that, then you can try a trade, right? And you could basically set your stop to what was resistance, so 3,055. Now, if it flags here and breaks, you got to watch last week's low, which is 29.74, and then 27.93 on the 1 hour chart. So just to kind of give you a heads up and a little bit of analysis of some of these things that aren't working too well right now. I'll give you just a couple things that I traded today. I actually tried a couple of charts that I thought were interesting here. Is Square, because Square is basically has filled the earnings gap and held the bottom of value for the day. Also touched the 50-day moving average. So it's got a shot, right? I'm not expecting Square to just blast right back up to the upside. So I sold a put spread. I collected a little bit of a premium. I know the premium is a little bit elevated in some of these names. So we'll see. It's got to hold it's basically got to hold here because I didn't structure this very wide, right? 172, 162 put spread for November. And then pins, is another one. Everybody was jumping up and down about pins, a couple weeks ago when they reported earnings. It did fill the earnings gap, right? Or no, maybe it didn't all the way. It filled this particular gap. But notice how the bar for the day closed above value. So I did take a target in this trade. Ultimately, this could be a really short scalp for me. I might actually take this thing off if it hits 57. Or I might hold a small portion, right? But again, probably has to do a little bit of back and filling, but it's doing that now, right? But nice hammer bar right there on the top of value. Also, net is another one that everybody's looking at these days. This also, basically a doji, even though it opened down 5% for the day, also filled this earnings gap too. So, we'll see. Again, these are high growth names. What other names was I watching today? We'll go over today's option activity. I just want to go through the rest of today's trades. Twilio saw some calls. So again, I bought the dip in a couple of these things. Like I said, I was looking for more value, but I just didn't find a ton of things. This AbbVie is kind of, it's already made a decent move, but we're continuing to see calls into this one. If you position in this one, because like I said, we did see call buying in this one. 101.86 is up there. By the way, I'm just going to mention this because I talked about how that there was Taiwan Semiconductor calls that went up for next week. Just keep in mind, right? We don't know what they're up to. They could be selling calls too. So I like Taiwan Semiconductor. I think it's into a little bit of support here, and if it falls down to 85, I'll probably add a little bit more. So legging into names is important, but it's funny that this option activity draws so many people in. Like, oh my God, there's so many calls on the tape. You don't know if they're selling calls versus that Apple event today. The way, again, that I use option activity, because the majority of the stuff that we see on the tape is wrong. I don't care how aggressive, right? They like to say, oh, the calls were swept. Yeah, well, 50% of them probably are on average don't work. Because I've never seen a study that says option activity works. 50% of it works, 50% of it doesn't. So, in my opinion, right? That's my that's my calculation. So, what do I use it for? I use it for an idea. And sometimes when everybody starts talking about it on Twitter, it gets momentum. So you could use it to day trade too. But I tell you, for every one of those trades where people jump out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, they knew on this trade," there's another one that didn't work. Right? You just don't hear what happens is it's a game that people play on Twitter. Right? They tweet a whole bunch of symbols, and then the ones that they work, they retweet over and over and over. The ones that don't work, you never hear from those names again, right? So it's very, very biased. So I'm being very candid in this particular video tonight. But I'll tell you, I've been doing this for a long time. I know how the games are played. Or how these guys, I don't play any of these games, but I know people play these games. So if you want to look at the names that saw option activity today, a lot of these names, like they're chasing a little bit too, right? AbbVie's already up. decently. LI, playing a little bit of a dip in my opinion, right? The name did come back from where it was this morning, but a lot of this stuff is day trading back and forth. But you had a nice little dip to buy in this one. Teva saw some calls today too. Stock didn't really do much. So for me, so the light bulb goes off a little bit. All right, somebody saw some calls that went up. Or sorry, there was calls that went up in Teva. I don't know if it's. I'm not here to play detective and figure out what hedge fund bought. I don't really care because most of these hedge funds they underperform the S&P anyway. I have to basically say, okay, well, Teva, do I want to get into a position? Well, I would wait until, for me personally, I would wait until it breaks out of the range. That's 966. That's top of value, and then I would kind of shoot for to take this trade off at the 200-day moving average, or this virgin point of control, which I can't see what 1077, right? So they both kind of line up. That's how I would kind of play Teva, but I didn't take it because it didn't close above value, right? So no confirmation there, in my opinion. A couple other names that Trip, I think a little bit of momentum there too, right? And a few other names that I've got written down. But again, they're kind of just another source for me where I can kind of think about if the chart looks good and for another area that I can pull ideas from. All right, guys. So that's it for today's video. We covered a lot of topics in 20 minutes, but overall, a couple names that I was watching too. I mentioned Goldman. This is another one that you may not have heard about for a while, which is L3. I also saw, I don't know if calls were bought in this one, but I did see some option activity on the tape. But it kind of looks interesting. It is, not a low price stock. It's $189. But could it continue to move out of this range? It could, right? You got a level to trade against, 186. 200 would be something to kind of move over for. And then the last sector, I know there was one thing that I forgot, but I did see, the biotech space kind of looks interesting to me. Remember, XBI is a lot different than IBB. XBI is equally weighted, meaning the small companies get the same representation as the larger companies. It's trying to break out here, right? It's held in pretty nicely, and I think it looks a little bit better than IBB. So I would prefer XBI here. So possible trade idea. So again, even though I took some trades, I do a lot of analyzing of charts throughout the day, and you can't take every single one, but this looks interesting to me, and you could basically trade this versus 120.32. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.